this is something that actually happened. Many people love Perry Stone for his ministry with the end times.
For decades, Perry Stone has built his reputation on one extraordinary promise, that he can see what others cannot. Through dreams, biblical prophecies, hidden patterns, insider information, and warnings about events before they unfold, the veteran evangelist has told audiences that something bigger is happening beneath the surface. But now, after a career marked by prophetic claims, ministry scandal, investigations, and controversy, at 67, Perry Stone says he's revealing it all. But how seriously should he be taken? Let's look at his life and career. The preacher who always had another revelation. Born on June 23, 1959, Perry Stone is a fourth-generation minister who began preaching at 16 and eventually built the voice of evangelism in Cleveland, Tennessee, into a large media and teaching operation.
Well-known Christian pastor Perry Stone just had this to say.
By his early 20s, he was already conducting extended revivals, sometimes preaching every night in the same church for as long as 11 weeks. His ministry later expanded into television, conferences, books, and digital media, with Manifest beginning its television run in September of 2000. But Stone's appeal has never rested solely on conventional Bible teaching. A major part of his public identity is the belief that dreams, visions, biblical patterns, and hidden prophetic codes can reveal information about events that have not happened yet. His own ministry sells teaching devoted specifically to interpreting dreams and visions, describing dreams as potential warnings from God, and saying that Stone has received spiritual insight into future events through them. Another of his books claims that Hebrew letters, numbers, Torah passages, and historical cycles can reveal prophetic information about America's future. In short, you can't evaluate Stone's career in ordinary terms. Stone's ministry describes visions as possible divine warnings, while his books present what he calls prophetic ciphers and patterns concealed within Scripture. And over the years, this framework has produced some extraordinary claims. Stone has marketed books promising to uncover prophetic codes that answer controversial questions, and says that, after decades of biblical research, he believes he has determined the sequence of future events hidden within biblical festivals. His ministry even describes one major study as an effort to unseal the Daniel cipher and use ancient Hebrew and Aramaic texts to identify future events, the Antichrist, and the kingdom associated with the end times. But wait, it only gets weirder from here. 11 letters, 9 women, and the ministry in crisis. In the spring of 2020, Perry Stone disappeared from the public eye. For a preacher who had built a multi-million-dollar ministry around constant preaching, television broadcasts, and prophetic conferences, the sudden silence was impossible for followers to miss. Stone was 60 years old at the time, and his voice of evangelism ministry in Cleveland, Tennessee, initially gave followers little explanation beyond saying that he was taking a sabbatical because of health concerns. Then, the real reason began to emerge. The ministry's board had received complaints about Stone's conduct toward female employees, and the board ultimately asked him to step away from public ministry and undergo counseling. What came next was far more serious than the vague announcement suggested. According to reporting by the Chattanooga Times Free Press, the board received 11 letters in April of 2020. 9 came from women employed by or connected to Stone's ministries. The other 2 came from people with knowledge of the alleged conduct. The letters described allegations of inappropriate physical contact, unwanted advances, inappropriate comments, and other conduct that several women characterized as sexual harassment or misconduct. At least one letter alleged that Stone would lock office doors to be alone with women, yet Stone himself acknowledged that something had happened. In an audio message played to a small group of church members and obtained by the Times Free Press, he said female employees had brought concerns about his words and sometimes actions to the board. He admitted that he had acted inappropriately with female employees, saying that he had let his guard down amid what he described as the weariness of non-stop ministry. He apologized to his wife, Pam, and to anyone who had been hurt or offended. His ministry's board said it had determined the issues were civil in nature and not criminal, but that Stone's behavior had deviated from the biblical standards expected of its leadership. The board then imposed a sabbatical, professional counseling, and what it described as strong accountability boundaries around his future ministry and travel. But there was an unsettling detail in Stone's own response. While the allegations were becoming public, he was also interpreting events through the same prophetic framework that had defined his ministry for decades. In one video, Stone described a dream in which he was being hunted by a giant snake that swallowed people, while he escaped by climbing onto a filing cabinet filled with negative information. He interpreted the snake as an attack from the devil against him and his ministry, and told followers that God had instructed him to remain silent about what was coming. The symbolism revealed how Stone understood the crisis, not simply as a workplace controversy, but as a spiritual battle surrounding his ministry. Or at least, that's how he wanted others to look at it. Then the story refused to stay buried. By late 2021, the Times Free Press reported that the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been questioning people connected with Stone's ministry. Separate reporting said the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was investigating at the request of District Attorney General Stephen Crump. At least 4 women later told the newspaper they considered themselves victims, while investigators were speaking with people connected to the ministry about misconduct allegations, Stone's finances, and his relationships with local law enforcement. That investigation produced another unusual thread. Since 2018, Voice of Evangelism had given the Bradley County Sheriff's Office more than $36,000 for equipment, including body cameras and in-car cameras. Stone and his ministries also regularly hired off-duty sheriff's employees for security at events. Such was the extent of Stone's connections with local law enforcement. Meanwhile, some longtime ministry employees and at least 2 board members, Frankie Powell and Wayne Penn, left after the allegations surfaced. Finally, in 2023, the case reached its most important legal checkpoint. After the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation examined the allegations, District Attorney Stephen Crump presented the findings to a Bradley County grand jury. The grand jury declined to indict Stone. Crump, nevertheless, said he had been concerned about the nature of the allegations and the evidence produced, and he said the case file would remain open if new information emerged. That outcome creates the line that must never be blurred. Perry Stone was not criminally charged, but the allegations were real enough. The 7 ugly fish. The strangest chapter in Perry Stone's crisis unfolded inside a prophecy. In November of 2021, while allegations about Stone's conduct were already public and his ministry was facing renewed scrutiny, Stone told his followers about a dream involving 7 ugly or evil fish. In his interpretation, the fishermen represented ministers. The fish they were trying to catch represented people seeking God, and the ugly fish represented individuals interfering with that work. Stone warned that these people would suffer consequences, with some potentially facing physical or spiritual death. You see, this was not an isolated prophecy from years earlier, but a message delivered while Stone was under intense public criticism. Then the metaphor became personal. During a special service in November, an unidentified woman interrupted Stone while he was speaking and accused him of being a nasty perv who kept touching people. Security removed her from the service, and Stone threatened legal action. According to contemporary reporting, he also said she had spoken with people who had told 16 lies about him and his wife. The following day, Stone publicly connected the woman to the dream he had described. He identified her as one of the ugly fish and said she was already marked by God to face a significant loss. One of Stone's longtime associates, Brian Cutshall, went even further during the confrontation, comparing what had just happened to the hostility directed at Jesus before his crucifixion, and describing it as Satan's plan against Jesus and those supporting him. And this was not the first time Stone had used dreams to interpret opposition around his ministry. Earlier, during the 2020 crisis, he described a dream in which a giant snake was swallowing people while he escaped by climbing onto a filing cabinet containing negative information. Stone interpreted the imagery as a demonic attack against his ministry. In another prophetic account published by his own ministry, he described seeing women whom he believed were witches, involved in a larger spiritual operation designed to create division inside churches and weaken Christian leaders. These accounts reveal something important about Stone's worldview. Conflict can be interpreted not merely as disagreement, but as evidence of an unseen spiritual battle. That worldview became even more visible when Stone responded to the journalism surrounding the allegations. In a December 2021 video titled "The Truth Behind Today's Media," he warned followers against trusting secular news organizations. Stone pointed to his more than 32 years working in television and argued that journalism could become driven by economics rather than truth. "It's not always about what's true or not," he said. "It's about the advertising dollars." He accused information of being twisted and suggested that secular reporting could construct false scenarios that might only be corrected years later. There is an important counterpoint here. Stone's Voice of Evangelism board rejected the Chattanooga Times Free Press reporting, arguing in a December 2021 statement that the story relied heavily on anonymous sources and was being sensationalized. The board said it stood by its earlier decisions concerning Stone and maintained that there was nothing new to report. Meanwhile, Stone himself maintained that he had been misunderstood, and that leaves the unsettling question at the heart of the Seven Ugly Fish episode. If a critic is simply a critic, their accusations can be investigated against evidence. But what happens when the criticism itself is seen as proof of demonic opposition? And just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder, the prophecies, secret information, and claims that never arrived. By the time Perry Stone was warning Americans about hidden terrorist networks, he had already spent decades building a reputation around information that, in his telling, existed just beyond the reach of ordinary people. But in December of 2015, that reputation took a distinctly political and frightening turn. Stone issued what the Jim Bakker Show presented as a terror alert, claiming that hundreds of ISIS sleeper cells existed across the southeastern United States and that weapons warehouses were waiting in all 50 states. He said the weapons would be distributed when the word was given, and warned that America could face a wave of attacks. Then, on June 1, 2018, Stone appeared on Jim Bakker's television program and announced that he had information that could completely change the story surrounding the 2016 election. He claimed that 64,000 emails existed proving that the Democratic Party had planned to use Russia to bring Donald Trump down.
Purple hair, green hair, nose, and whistles. The moment that the crowd started coming, they rioted.
Stone said he could not reveal where the material came from, but claimed a whistleblower possessed the emails and predicted that viewers would soon see leak after leak, exposing what he described as a much larger conspiracy. Then came Watergate. During the same period, Stone told Bakker about a government intelligence officer who, according to Stone, had attended his father's church in Northern Virginia. Stone claimed this person knew the whole truth about the Watergate scandal and that the person responsible was still alive. He further suggested that the revelation of this information could destroy the Democratic Party. The story was especially striking because Stone said he possessed a recording involving his father and the alleged intelligence source. The same pattern appeared in an even darker claim later in 2018. Stone told his audience that an unnamed billionaire businessman had given him information about powerful European figures. According to Stone, the businessman said that many world leaders were Luciferians who believed Satan controlled earthly kingdoms, and who, at elite dinners, supposedly prayed to Lucifer before eating. Stone presented the account as something the businessman had personally witnessed among powerful people in Europe. Then the world entered the coronavirus pandemic, and Stone's prophetic framework collided with an unfolding global crisis. On March 13, 2020, during a prayer meeting at his church in Cleveland, Tennessee, Stone claimed the coronavirus was connected to a demonic spirit of Amalek attacking older Americans. He argued that older people were more resistant to the biblical mark of the beast, while younger generations might be more willing to accept future technologies associated with it. He also linked the removal of older conservative Americans to the possibility of socialism and communism gaining influence. And he did not stop there. 5 days later, Stone argued that it was perhaps more than coincidence that states associated with prominent Democratic politicians were experiencing major outbreaks. He specifically pointed to areas associated with Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Adam Schiff, while noting that West Virginia, which had strongly supported Trump, had not yet reported a case. The problem arrived almost immediately. West Virginia announced its first COVID case that same day. What makes the timeline more revealing is that Stone later incorporated the pandemic directly into his published prophecy system. His 2020 book, The Final Ciphers and the Return of Christ, contains 20 chapters of what his ministry calls new prophetic insight, including a chapter explicitly examining how COVID-19 fits into biblical end-time signs. In all of these instances, we see a pattern. Information arrives through a hidden source, a dream, a prophetic interpretation, an alleged insider, or a pattern that only becomes visible through his particular reading of events. Sometimes the information is presented before the public can verify it. Sometimes it is theological interpretation applied to events already unfolding. How can anyone answer any of this? But wait, it gets weirder. The latest chapter in Perry Stone's story begins with a claim so extraordinary that even by his standards it sounds almost impossible. And then came the aliens. On April 27, 2026, Perry Stone introduced his audience to a story that sounded less like an ordinary news report and more like the opening scene of a science fiction thriller. Stone said a pastor friend had contacted him about a private meeting involving a large number of pastors and people described as being connected with the United States government. Stone was careful to say he was not going to reveal every detail, but he said the pastors had been invited to a particular state because officials and others supposedly had a concern they wanted church leaders to hear. According to Stone, pastors were allegedly being told to prepare their congregations for information about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. He quoted a warning to prepare people for what could soon be released. Stone claimed the disclosure might involve crafts supposedly discovered that were not from Earth, along with materials allegedly originating elsewhere. Then came an even stranger detail. Stone referred to very strange reptilian-looking creatures and other descriptions that, in his words, sounded almost like something from a science fiction movie or an H.G. Wells book. But Stone was not presenting this simply as a question of strange objects appearing in the sky. He focused heavily on what such a revelation could do to people's beliefs. His concern was that disclosure of non-human intelligence could create two dramatically different reactions. Some believers might begin questioning Christianity, while some non-believers could turn toward religion because they would suddenly be searching for answers about humanity's place in the universe. That interpretation fits directly into Stone's long-standing theological framework, which includes end-times prophecy and a dispensationalist reading of biblical events. Regarding his source, Stone said the friend had a great church, but he did not publicly name the pastor, the officials involved, the location of the meeting, or provide the alleged briefing materials. That means the claim should be presented exactly as it was made. Perry Stone reported what another pastor told him about a meeting involving government-connected figures. It is not the same thing as Stone personally witnessing the whole thing, the story nevertheless gained momentum. Other Christian figures subsequently discussed similar claims about private meetings concerning UFO disclosure, including Pastor Alan Didio and others. Public discussion of the alleged meetings spread rapidly in early May, with some participants claiming that religious leaders had been warned about the potential social and theological consequences of future disclosures. But similarity between accounts is not the same thing as independent verification. The public record still does not provide the underlying government documents, a complete list of attendees, an official transcript, or publicly authenticated evidence showing that officials briefed pastors about extraterrestrial beings. And there is a larger reason this matters for Stone specifically. His audience has heard versions of this structure before. Information supposedly known by insiders, warnings received before the public understands an event, hidden meanings discovered through prophecy, and threats interpreted through a biblical framework. The subject has changed dramatically over the years, from terrorism and political conspiracies to COVID and end times prophecy, but the narrative mechanism remains remarkably familiar. There is something happening beneath the surface, Stone says, and those who know how to recognize the signs can see it coming before everyone else. But here's the problem. How can you disprove a claim that has not even been proven, or even can be proven? At least Stone's followers seem not to be bothered by it, but what do you think about his claims and career? Let us know in the comments below. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.